Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and children of all ages. I am Rob, here in the lair of OmnusI, having survived the A Night with Alice Cooper concert last night, and now tonight, indulging in a little Werewolves of the Caribbean. This was a session where all players were in attendance, which is always good, especially since this was a challenge for the entire pack. So, when we last left our intrepid group, they were being challenged to break the wards that would allow them to approach the priestess of the Raven Queen, a powerful celestial spirit, that they'd be able to take back the Phoenix Dagger that had been stolen from the Silver Fangs. This was to, again, continue on the storyline with Aiden Whitepaw, the pack leader, and his family debts. So, the group was being tested on courage. They found themselves in a large church that had been kind of hollowed out with a bunch of angel statues around, and they were in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. How this was supposed to test their courage and bravery, they weren't sure, but they began attempting to barricade. They knocked down one of the angel statues and rolled it in front of the door. One of the tests was, even though they're werewolves, in this place they weren't allowed to access any of their werewolf abilities. So no super fast healing, no big claws, none of the things that would normally make zombies relatively harmless. They had to make do with ingenuity and wit. They also needed to kind of explore around a little bit and find out their situation. Nathan, who missed the tail end of the prior session, the Get Fenris, went around and he inspected around by the confessionals and found out that there was a deep darkness within that tried to grab him. He left that area while the rest of them were attempting to barricade. Several of them decided they were going to go up to the church balcony, the choir loft, and see what was going on up there as the door to the outside was being splintered by zombies. They decided that would be a good defensive point to make a stand, so they started to move an angel statue over to in front of one of the doors, because both doors went up to the choir loft on the eaves of the building. So they managed to block one off. At the same time, they also found out if they pushed the statue over, generally the arms of the angels would break off, and they would largely be intact. So the group armed themselves with arms of the angels. Crude stone clubs, marginally better than using their own hand-to-hand abilities. So everybody grabbed one of those when they were knocking the statues down, just vandalizing the statues for their arms to be able to swing as weapons. Nathan investigated the altar while the others were congregating and making their plans. The zombies finally broke through. Nice thing about a zombie apocalypse is when the action gets dull, the zombies can do something. So they burst through the door and started filling the room. However, Nathan was not up there. He discovered that the altar could move, and after moving it, he discovered there was a trapdoor underneath the altar. And he used his arm to try to break through the padlock that was on the altar. When he did that, he shattered his arm, the arm of the statue, so he didn't have his weapon anymore. But as he got finished with that, he heard a cry of surprise from down underneath the trapdoor, which revealed that there were some innocents at play. Aiden realized that Nathan was not going to be able to make it up to the rest of them in the loft while he was down below. So he decided he was going to leap off of the balcony and land on top of the zombies to try to screen them off, because that's the kind of person he is. And he bulldogged one to the floor and splashed its brains all over the floor and got up pretty much unscathed from his 20-plus foot drop. So he made it down, and the rest of them were all considering their options. There was a staircase at the top of the choir loft, there was a separate section with another door that Peter, the Ragabash, was trying to pick the lock on to get up. He was using some of the scraps that looked like they had a pipe organ that had been destroyed. Most of the parts being carried off. There were a few pipes left above. I thought I'd give them some construction materials so they could be creative if they wanted to. And they also, there were some like nails and things. So he was using nails basically as crude lockpicks to try to get through the door. Vlad and, to a lesser extent, Nikolai, the Shadow Lord Galliard, and the child of Gaia, Theurge, were kind of left in a situation where, Aiden told us to stay up here. Vlad took his arm club and moved down to poke at zombies that were trying to get up one of the choir loft staircases. It was a good tactical defensive spot. Nikolai spent several rounds just kind of keeping an eye on things, wondering what to do. He is their healer, and kept himself pretty much out of the combat for the most part. However, Peter eventually ended up picking the lock, and he went up. There's a ladder that went all the way up to the belfry. He went up there and saw that it was open to the sky. He also saw that there were a number of zombies who were breaking in the back of the church. They had not seen that there was a more concealed... Everyone like my hat? It's a nice hat. There was a concealed door leading back to the sacristy and other priest chambers. So the zombies were coming in from that side, but they hadn't made their appearance yet in the fight. So Nathan makes a huge strength roll, the Herculean, breaks the lock, sees there's this mother and daughter down there, and he goes down to try to get them out, or to see if there's another escape out through the bottom. Finds out there isn't. It's a big wine cellar where the church wine was stored, and nothing very useful down there, but he figured correctly that part of showing bravery was to put the well-being of these innocents before his own. So he convinced them. The little girl was convinced that he was an angel. I made it very cute and very sweet, and they got her up the stairs. The mother had the remains of a torch that was still burning and singed him pretty good as he was trying to carry her up the ladder, which it's tough, even though he's very, very strong. Carrying a woman who's dead weight up the ladder, very difficult, but he managed. So at the same time, the rest of the characters were up on top of the balcony. Aiden is fighting like mad, using this largely ineffectual club until it shatters, trying to find some way of stemming the zombies, keeping them off of Nathan while Nathan's doing whatever he's doing. At this point, Peter starts thinking, okay, I've got to get out there and try to help out. I've been uninjured so far, so I'm looking at there were pillars arranged, keeping up the roof, and he thought he would jump the 15 feet from the balcony to a pillar and slide down ahead of the zombies so that he could fan out and help Aiden. Well, he was preparing to make this jump, and Nikolai had been basically holding the whole time. He was like, oh, okay, I'll try that first. So he runs, he makes the distance, no problem. He botches any chance of cleanly getting to the pillar, breaks his nose, just pulps it, and slams his crotch and knocks his wind out of him as he slides down onto his butt. So he's dazed, and the zombies are closing in. So Peter decides, okay, that doesn't look like as attractive of a thing as I wanted to do. So instead he liked Aiden's idea of jumping down using the zombies as a cushion. He rolled quite well. Not so much distance, but he rolled extremely well for the landing, so he ended up coming down on top of two zombies and riding them down and breaking them. And he was in a position to peel off some of the zombies that would have been going after Nikolai. Well, Vlad had been holding his fight, and he got bitten once, but nothing too serious. He decides he's going to go back, and he's going to do what everyone else has been doing, these huge jumps into the zombie horde and getting some casualties and getting closer to the action. That didn't go so well. He jumped, and he botched, just flat out failed. So he ran, and he basically got tripped up on the balcony and face planted. And knocked himself completely out. He didn't hit any of the zombies. It was, love the way I described it was like if you see those movies where there's like this big crowd and somebody's up on stage and one guy goes crowd diving and that's great fun. The crowd is bearing them around, and then the next person who's very large tries and everyone just gets out of the way and basically what happened to poor Vlad. And unfortunately, when there's a zombie apocalypse around, being on the ground and unconscious is not a good way to be. So when the zombies got to go next, the first thing they did is rip poor Vlad to pieces. He was unconscious. There was nothing he could do. He couldn't defend himself. The zombies were all around. And if you've ever seen one of those zombie movies, you have probably a pretty good idea of what it looks like for a person being torn apart by zombies. It's not pretty. Not a good way to go. So he's down. Now, fortunately, Peter had drawn off enough people, and he was in pretty good shape. He was unscathed from the fall, that he was able to peel off enough people to enough zombies so that Nikolai only got bitten once and not too seriously. I think Peter got nicked a little bit, but for the most part, his luck was pretty strong for that, considering all the attacks the group had incoming. Now, Aiden did amazingly. Without having any of his abilities, he didn't have, Luna's armor or anything. He was shrugging off these zombie attacks. Now, how I ran this horde was, for the most part, up to 6 zombies could attack a person at a time. If all 6 could come around and attack, they would try to restrain a person, and if that person was restrained and being attacked by the zombies, they got a damage bonus. Otherwise, they were all trying to latch on and beat down Aiden, who was able to move and stop himself from getting surrounded in the beginning part of this fight. Any other time, he had somebody backing him up so that he couldn't be completely surrounded and pinned. So these zombies were making do with just raking attacks, and if they had no extra successes, they were just doing base 3 dice damage. Aiden was resisting with 4 dice for soaking. If they got extra successes, they got extra damage, which could help. And they were nickeling and diming him. He was taking a point of damage here, a point of damage there, but for the most part, for what came in, he did an amazing job of keeping on his feet. When Nathan got up with the mother and daughter, it was pretty clear that they had to protect these 2 innocents. And the little girl still thinks that, thought that Nathan was an angel. She's like, oh, the angel has come to take us up to heaven. And they're like, oh, we have to get them up through the zombie horde and up the ladder up to the belfry. So Aiden's like, all right, time to put on the big boy Silverfang pants, and he charged back into the zombie horde, bull rushing and clearing them through. Aiden is very strong. He's very dexterous, and he's quite tough. So he was able to, clear out people out of the way like Lawrence Taylor, with a quarterback in front of him, just pushing people out of the way, going for his target. His first target was to get back to the rest of his pack and to clear a path for Nathan and the woman and her child, which he did. Rolled a really good success. Now, Nathan is not a combat weak character. He's a Geta Fenris. He's very strong. His other physical stats are quite good. But he never gets the most out of them. And when he does, it's amazing. He can ruin somebody completely. In this, he pushed a couple people out of the way, took a bunch of shots. The family fortunately got through unscathed because my dice decided to go cold at that stage. And the other 2 got back. They were kind of pinned on the side that they had blockaded off the angel statue to hold the door. So they had to wait 2 rounds for the group to get the statue out of the way again. They were able to, because Peter thinks outside of the box, they actually use the statue as a weapon and crush a couple of zombies with it. And then they all skedaddled up the stairs while Aiden held the staircase. He backed up in the staircase. Only 1 zombie could attack him in a narrow, enclosed environment, and he kept his options open for defense rather than attacking and slaughtering through zombies, which didn't cut down the overall amount of zombies, which were limitless, and I think he knew that by this point. But he did stop the zombies from coming up. The problem was Vlad had retreated up the other staircase, and when he did that, the zombies pursued him. So there were zombies up in the loft, 8 of them all told. So when Nathan came up, he was confronted by zombies. Now, one thing I forgot to mention about this. Nathan got bitten in the leg when he climbed up. He blocked off zombies from attacking the mother and child, and he got a critical bite, maximum damage from the zombie. He was down to crippled. He had to use his gift of resist pain to be able to act pretty much at all. Now, they slipped by me. I forgot that their supernatural abilities were gone, and I kind of let that go. Wasn't thinking too hard, and it really wasn't anything too critical, because he was more than aware of the danger he was in, that he was one hit away from death. So it wasn't a matter of bravery at this point. I just didn't think of it, and I let him get away with it. So he manages to escort the mother and child while he is himself taking on 8 zombies. Now, when they were attacking in combat and they hit and they did a lot of damage, I allowed the damage to spill over to multiple zombies, which allowed them to take out multiple zombies in a single blow. They didn't have access to rage or anything, so I determined that those attacks, they just were really being deliberate. So Nathan attacks and he spears 2 zombies and knocks them off the balcony and gets rid of them. By far the easiest way of getting rid of these zombies was just to pitch them forward, because they'd just crush more zombies and die. So at this point, Aiden is still holding back, their toughest, most capable fighter. So it's Nathan, who is on the verge of death, Nikolai, who's kind of roughed up, but he's not really a fighter. He's got his hook because he's been missing his hand since his rite of passage, but he's not very good with it, so he's lashing out impotently against these zombies. And then Peter comes up. Now, Peter's got the shadow on his arm that he can turn into a stabbing lance and other useful abilities with it. So they pop up and they start fighting the zombies. Now, Nikolai goes down. He's taken enough damage at this point, both self-inflicted as well as what the zombies did, and because he's stuck in human form, he's not healing. So the bashing damage he took, breaking his nose and whatever, when the zombie hit him again, he dropped from just too much damage accumulated. So now Peter has to defend him, and he takes on multiple zombies repeatedly, trying to keep them from finishing off Nikolai the way that they did Vlad. And he does extremely well. The zombies can't seem to nail him. He takes a few blows. Again, he's getting nickel and dimed. The zombies aren't able to grapple him and rip him to shreds, so he's maintaining his elusiveness. But at the same time, he's clearing out a zombie or 2 at a time. He's effectively fighting them, but more zombies are coming up the staircase that Aiden is not protecting. Nathan gets tangled up. He's trying to help the woman and child up the ladder, which he finds out about. But he's, of course, in real danger of dying himself, so he tries to go up the ladder with them. Well, the zombies that were attacking him kind of go up, and while he's trying to fight, he manages to knock one zombie up and sneak up. The zombie that he had injured with a mighty punch, because he's very strong, grabbed his leg. And while Nathan was able to swing his foot and break the hand of the zombie that was grabbing his leg, he also twisted and ripped his own hands off of the ladder and fell down and basically ended up in kind of a chicken fighting position on top of the zombie's shoulders, which was funny. Aiden fought the derpiest zombie ever in the staircase. He barely had to do any defense. He was just basically slap fighting to hold it down so that it wasn't attacking him, wasn't moving up any further. So he was, even though in fighting he was extremely badly injured from being chipped on. Finally, he even lost a foot. His crippling blow was a particularly nasty one, even though he saved rather well. I've been getting some mileage out of this random hit location die because it's funny. And yeah, it took off his right foot. So that was unfortunate for him. But he was managing to hold on and keep the zombies down because they couldn't hit. So eventually, Nathan pops the head off of his zombie by squeezing his thighs and going and trying to fight the last one. Peter just gets some inspired fighting, drop kicks a bunch of zombies down the staircase to tie them all up in a big mess, comes over and just does an excellent execution move, strangling the zombie down, breaking him over his knee, and just splitting the undead in half to free up Nathan so that he can escape. And Peter showed some excellent tactical skills working with the others to keep everybody alive. It was very impressive, and the whole time he was safeguarding Nikolai. He grabbed Nikolai, threw him in the gantry, the staircase or the ladder going up, and closed and locked the door himself, which locked Aiden out with the zombies, but gave them a little bit of defense while the mother and daughter climbed up the rest of the way. Aiden didn't take another blow. The mother and daughter got up. The test was done. They all risked their lives numerous times to save them. They passed the test. They all did. I was the whole time keeping track of all the different daring things they did and the things that were just showing bravery and not stupidity. That's different, but bravery. And they passed easily, risking themselves numerous times for these innocents that they had no reason to do anything other than throw them off to the zombies for zombie bait while they escaped. That didn't work. So after the mother and daughter had gotten to the top, the red moon that was overhead switched to pure white, and the castle just kind of disintegrated around them. They fell through space and then got ejected out through the door. Half of the damage that they had taken was healed, which meant that every single one of them was back. And yes, even Vlad was restored to life, even though he was badly wounded. It was just a matter of them changing form, going to Krynos or what have you, and healing up their injuries as werewolves again. The only one who's got any kind of aggravated damage, I believe, was Nathan. And the only reason he took aggravated damage was because he was carrying the woman, and she still had that lit torch, and she burned him on the way up. So they passed the test. It ran through a good two and a half hours of the zombie apocalypse, which is as much zombie apocalypse as I can stand. All the same, it was a pretty darn good test, and they definitely showed a decent amount of bravery and fortitude, despite not having their gifts, despite not having all their usual advantages. So they decided to go to the next one, the last room, which is the room test of combat. And this is unfortunately the time where Nathan's player had to leave, so he wasn't participating, so it was the 4 remaining group members. They opened the door and found a volcanic blasted wasteland with large looming purple thunderclouds overhead, blasting blue lightning across the skies. And as they found out, also blasting blue lightning down into the ground because Peter got zapped for a point of damage from lightning. So they scooted across the plain, and there was this bright pavilion at the end of the short path from the doorway. And when Vlad just flippantly tried to open the door, or open up a panel of the tent, all of a sudden he was blasted with, "Who dares approach me?" The volume of the noise just literally blasted him back. And then, of course, Vlad's player is a teenager. And he's like, "Your master." And he got laughed at. "You are no master." And then the walls of the pavilion pegs that held the walls down snapped out, and a mighty force blew the pavilion upward, inside out. And at the center was this huge man, height-wise about 12 feet tall standing, but also width-wise, about 6-7 feet across. He's enormously overweight, but at the same time his arms, his legs were all, clearly muscular. He was easily able to move, and he had a massive 10-foot tall mace/club with a 4-foot diameter head. So everything about him was enormous. And he waited for them to say they wanted their challenge of combat. And he asked if they wanted one person to represent them or if they wanted to fight as a whole. Now, Aiden was juiced. He was more than ready to fight. He had Luna's armor up. He had his razor claws on. he was ready to go to town. But they picked the pack to fight. And in this particular place, there's enough enchantment that it evens the odds. So he grew up to 40 feet tall, to the point where the club was just a small club, even though it's still enormous. But to him, it's not the oversized weapon that it otherwise would be. And so they got ready to fight. Now, what they didn't know was that this big fellow is slippery. His skin is very oily. And he has a lot of resistance to damage. He's very tough. So when Aiden goes up and starts clawing at him, he does no damage. And then Nikolai goes up with his hook can now turn into a cutlass. And he goes up and he slashes, and he does no damage. But because the big guy can sense that cutlass of his has special powers, and he can sense the spirit that's on him, he mistakenly thinks that Nikolai is the most dangerous person in the group, when in reality, to him right now, Peter's probably the most dangerous because of the weapon he's using, closely followed by Aiden. If Aiden gets a full-powered punch, that's going to hurt with those claws. So he belly splashes on top of Nikolai, which is kind of a running joke. I didn't think about it at the time. I really didn't. But back in the day, Matt was playing a cleric, and they fought a dragon, and the dragon sat on top of the cleric so that he couldn't heal the party. Fun was had for all. Well, this kind of the same thing happened. He's flattened he flattened Nikolai to stop him from doing anything, and possibly to crush him unconscious. And sure enough, once again, he was cut off from the rest of his group. Except this time, he was in the navel of the big giant, so he was able to move around a little bit, able to keep attacking, and although it wasn't the most pleasant of places to be. So we did not get through a full round because it was getting really late. The group attacked, and they were able to do some damage. Peter did some damage with his Shadow Lance. Aiden was able to, via his razor claws, injure the big giant, but it's very little damage. The giant is barely nicked. The fight is clearly still going against the group. He was able to get one club shot in on Aiden, and Aiden soaked like mad and barely took any damage. And he is able to attack more than once in a round, and he used his club, and he attacked Peter, and he knocked Peter flying. Peter is not in the combat anymore. He's about a good 20 to 25 feet away, because he used a rage action to dash back to try to get in the fight again. So the rest of the group, they're all wrestling and tagging. Vlad tried some unorthodox combat techniques. He decided he was going to take his last remaining homemade bomb, and he was going to try to go underneath the giant and put it someplace tender on him. And the slipperiness of the giant made this very difficult. Finally, he got up to the top of the giant, and he decided he was going to just use the bomb on the giant's head. But he didn't have any means of lighting it. So what he was going to do was he was going to overcharge the flash pan in his pistol to create enough fire to set off the bomb. So while he's aiming the pistol at the giant's head, he's also trying to touch off the bomb. And he didn't botch, but he didn't succeed. And when you're working with a homemade bomb, which is, it's not a proper bomb or grenade or anything, it's made from cobbled together parts, not only did he miss the giant, because he did, even with the bonuses of how big he was, the roll didn't go through. So he missed the giant, but he also set off too much of the charge, and the bomb exploded in his hand, which he weathered fairly well. The giant wasn't even bothered, but he shattered his pistol that he got in his rite of passage. So he disarmed one of his weapons, but he still got his muskets. And right now they are crawling over him like the Lilliputians on Gulliver. So next time we play, hopefully Nathan's player will be back, so it'll be a proper pack challenge. They have not yet begun to fight, but there's plenty more fight left for it. So we'll be starting the next Werewolves of the Caribbean game with the whole group already with the session already in progress. Nathan will have to catch up, but he's only going to be out of it for one round. But that is the state of my dungeon at this time. Middle of a fight, Werewolves of the Caribbean, way away from the Caribbean, way in the Umbra. But that is how werewolf games can go in my game. So, moving closer towards resolving this wing of the story and dealing with the Raven Queen's priestess, and we will resume our normal Caribbean activities after that. So, I'm Rob, player of OmnusI, giving you my State of the Dungeon address. Thanks for joining me, and have safe adventures.